Welcome to Live, Think Differently. My name is Toby Clark, and I'm going to be with you live here today, just for the next 20 minutes or so. Today we're going to talk about living your passion. I've met so many people in my life. You probably have too. Maybe you're one of them that just don't know how to live their passion. They're stuck in a job that doesn't fit. Feel like they're bound to something that is only paying their bills and nothing more. I can remember being in ministry a number of years at a few different churches, and I can remember meeting a number of people, pastors, people who were working in different areas of the church that would confide in me, and they would clearly tell me that if they could do something different, they would. They were clearly not living their passion. In fact, I found in church work, in being paid by the church for as many years as I was, that so many times the issue of being paid, the issue of receiving money, really made it like a job. And when you turn something into a job, you begin to take whatever passion there was out of it. Now, hear me in this. You might have a job, but more than likely, if you consider it a job, it's not your passion. And I want you to think about that. I've spent a number of years doing things that were not my passion. Thankfully, I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I truly am. I'm in my sweet spot. I'm living my passion like I never have before. But I can quickly go back to those days when living my passion was far outside of anything that was reality in my life, that's for sure. And that's probably where you're at. I think 95% of people in America in particular are not living their passion. They're waking up every day. They're going to a job that doesn't fit them. They're getting a paycheck at the end of the week. They're paying off bills. They're paying off credit card bills. They're paying down their house. They're getting food for the kids and their family, and maybe hopefully having a little bit left to give to the church or some local charity. But every day seems like a job to them. And to get out of that job, even for 7 days, we call a vacation. Now, I'd like to challenge the concept of vacation as well on this podcast video. Vacation is something that our society has created to be this 7 or 10 day, maybe a 14-day stint of time that would allow us to get away from what we consider to be our job. Now, I know this is outside of what might be normal thinking, but I want to challenge you to begin to see the possibility of living your life as if it were a vacation each and every day. And you might say, it's impossible, there's no way to do that. And I'm here to tell you that it is possible. When you're living your passion, it's almost as if you're on vacation. You're relaxed, you're thinking clearly, you're ready to get up for another day because you get to do what you're doing rather than you have to do what you're doing. And again, back to church ministry. I want to go back to that just here for a second. And I was in church ministry, just so you know, probably about 10 years or so altogether, being paid by the church. And it always struck me when I would come across people, and it was quite often, to be honest. I would come across people who were working next to me, and they felt like they were trapped. They felt like this was not what they were cut out to do. This was not even necessarily maybe what God wanted them to do. But here's what kept them in the position that they were in. A house payment, 2 or 3 kids that were now getting close to becoming teenagers, private school possibly, the need to pay off 1 car or 2 cars, having a monthly payment on those cars that were way too high to begin with. And they felt like that if they would stop doing what they're doing, getting the paycheck that they were getting, there would be no way to be able to pay off the mortgage, pay off the cars, pay for the private school, and also take care of all of the extracurricular things that their kids were wanting to do. And I can remember listening to these stories, same story from a lot of different people over and over and over again. And I can remember in my early 20s, I can remember thinking to myself and even saying to myself, I will never become one of those people. I can remember going to people and even saying, this is not me. I am not going to just succumb to what everybody else has succumbed to, because that's what we do in America. And I can remember being told this, Toby, and they would even say it just like this. They would say, Toby, one day you'll learn that you just have to accept that that's the way life is. And I was in my early 20s. Most of these people felt like I didn't have enough life behind me, and I can understand that. But I can remember thinking in the back of my head, if I become one of those people, I don't know what I'm going to think of myself. And now I'm 38 years old. A little bit of time has passed. And I can tell you I've made some decisions that in those people's eyes wouldn't have been wise decisions. I have left positions. I have let go of paychecks. I have turned down opportunities because I know at this point in my life that nothing can be a job. If it's a job, I'm not going to be happy. And especially when ministry becomes a job, I believe that the passion that is inside our hearts begins to get sucked out of us faster than we even know what to do with it. And it's a very delicate situation when ministry becomes a job. It becomes your expectation. It becomes what everyone expects you to do and be. It becomes waking up and getting a checklist and marking off the things that need to be done that day. And in a sense, the passion that God has inspired in us by His Holy Spirit living in our hearts begins to dissipate, because we begin to take charge. We begin to let our schedules, we begin to let our jobs, we begin to let the expectations that are put upon us take precedence over what God has called us to and who God has called us to be. And I was determined to say, no, it's not going to happen to me. I don't care if people think I'm crazy. I don't care if saying no to this opportunity or resigning from this ministry position looks absolutely ridiculous to everybody around me. I am determined to be a man that is not stuck according to his circumstances. But I am determined to be a man that is living in accordance with what God has put within me and letting the passion that He has lit my heart with come out. And again, so often I find that there are so few of us out there that can actually say that about our everyday life. Now, you might be the type of person that says, you know what, Toby, I think you're living in a dream world. I think you're speaking to, a couple of people out there that, maybe they've got a job that just happened to be the perfect scenario, but the reality is it's never going to happen to me. And here's my response to that. My response is, yeah, it's never going to happen to you unless you choose, unless you make choices, and oftentimes difficult choices that will begin to pave the way for you to be able to live your passion. It doesn't happen overnight. I agree with that most of the time. And I would agree that in our early 20s outside of college, usually we don't get to live our passion right out of the gate. But what I would say is by the time we become 30, 31, 32, we've been in that career, we've been in that job for so long that we begin to feel stuck. And maybe that's where you're at right now. Maybe you are in those early 30s, approaching 40, kind of that halftime in your life. You're coming upon that point where you're asking yourself questions of, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? Is this have meaning? Do I have meaning? What's life all about? Any of those questions you begin to ask during what I call halftime in your life. You might be at that point right now if you're listening to this. I've been there. I feel like I'm still there right now, and God is still working that out for me. But I can tell you this, unless you make some difficult decisions, unless you step out and say no to some things, unless you potentially resign from the position that you're in, you'll never live your passion. You'll never live your passion until you step out and begin paving the way so that you might live your passion. I don't know how else to say that. For me, let me tell you a little bit about how it's happened for me over the last 10 years or so. Outside of college, we were doing youth ministry. My wife and I, we had Caleb, our son, about 6 years into our marriage. And that made us, we got married at 20. We were about 26 years old when we first had Caleb. And still at a point in our life where I definitely don't feel like I was living my passion. But I had enough in me to know that I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing. I felt like God was using us, felt like we were being obedient. We were doing the things that we needed to do at that age. But I knew that there was something more, that I had been created for something more. And so we continued on. We ended up going up to an area in Northern California on staff at a church up there. I was able to do some very, very influential ministry, as well as ministry that I felt like was a good fit for me. But I found a couple of years into that again, I felt like I was treating it as if it were a job for me. And I got to the point where I had to decide, either I'm going to do what everyone else who is a little bit older than me has done, either I'm going to become one of these people that I have referred to already that gets stuck in their situation, or I am going to decide now to do something about it. And at about the age of, I guess it would have been 28, 29, maybe 30 years old, maybe about 30 years old, if I'm remembering right. I came to my wife and I said, honey, I feel like it's time to step out. I feel like God is asking us to do something for Him without being paid for it. And that's where it came for me. I had been paid to do ministry, and for me, that became a big rubbing point for me. Maybe you're in that boat. Maybe you're in a paid ministry position right now, and you can identify with what I'm saying. Money and ministry sometimes don't mix. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that a pastor is worth his wages, and that doing ministry, that those that are in ministry full-time are definitely worthy of being paid to do it. I agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. But I think it's very important to note that just because we are deserving of that wage doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be a hindrance that comes with that wage. I look at Apostle Paul, and you see when he talks to the church of Corinth, I believe it is, that he speaks very clearly and very boldly that he was not willing to receive from them any money. And I believe that it was very specific. Now, there were other churches that he did receive money from, but I believe that there was something in Paul that was very wise, and he understood enough to know that if money was going to become a hindrance in his relationship with that church, then it wasn't worth receiving. If money was going to become a hindrance in his ministry in some form or fashion, it wasn't worth receiving. And that is why we know that Paul continued to be a tent maker through much of his ministry. And I believe that there is significance in that because Paul understood that this whole mix of money and ministry can come, it can come with its challenges. Now, again, that's not to say that Paul did not deserve being paid for what he was doing, traveling from church to church, preaching and teaching. Yes, he deserved it, but he understood that in many instances it was better for him not to receive it. And that's all I'm trying to say. I think there is a time and a place to be paid. And I have no problem paying the pastors of the church that I go to. I love my church. I love our pastors. I support them 100%. But all I am telling you is that for me, it became a hindrance. And that became a point in time when I had to look myself in the eyes and say, Toby, are you going to continue this knowing where it leads in so many cases, or are you going to step out and do something different? And I decided at that point to step out and do something different. And I'll talk in other podcasts, videos later on what I have done in the last 10 years. In many ways, I consider myself a serial entrepreneur, even through ministry from the age of probably 10 years old on. That would be what I would consider myself. But now, the last 10 years, I feel like I've really been able to mix these two worlds together, being an entrepreneur as well as living out a life of ministry in a way like I never have been able to before. And it's been exciting. I can tell you that now more than ever, I am living out my passion. I am doing not what I consider to be a job. I am doing what I consider to be a joy. And if you find yourself being in a position that is other than that, my challenge to you would be think about the steps that you need to take to get from seeing it as a job and beginning to see it as a joy, beginning to see it as something that you get to do rather than you have to do. Now, you may not ever be able to take what you're doing now and turn that into your passion. It may require something much more drastic than that. It may require doing something like I have done in the past, quitting your job, going to your wife or going to your husband and saying, I'm not going to become that person. I understand that this might sound crazy, but I would rather live my passion than continue to live life the way that I'm living now. And I'm not here to tell you how you should do it. I'm not here to tell you exactly when you should do it. But what I'm here to challenge you in is I'm here to challenge you towards taking those steps, whatever that looks like for you. It might not mean going into your boss tomorrow and turning in your resignation letter. But for some of you, it might. For some of you, you might have been at this point for years, and listening to this is the final straw. And it does mean that you're going to stay up late tonight. You're going to write the resignation letter and you're going to hand it in. Now, whatever that decision is that you make, the decision that you're making is to live life more fully. The decision that you're not making is to live life stupidly. But those two can seem to blend together sometimes. Now, what do I mean by that? Sometimes in positions that I have been in, when I have stepped down from positions and I have let go of a paycheck, in some people's eyes, that looks like stupidity. But what I can tell you from my perspective, there's a few things going on. Again, one thing, and the overriding thing, is that I'm never going to let a job get the best of me. I'm never going to allow a paycheck to become my life. But I will also tell you that there's always something inside of me that is running in the background as well. I'm not jumping out of a position without knowing that there are other opportunities that I could possibly jump into. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't an aspect of faith in stepping out of any position, because there absolutely is. But I think there needs to be some prep work done ahead of time in order for you to be ready for that next step. As I've said before, paving the way to get to that place where you can live out your passion. Okay. Now, if you want to talk more about this, we're going to end the podcast, the video cast here, and we want you to go to our Facebook page. You can find us on facebook.com/live think differently. And that's where we're going to have interactions throughout the week. We're going to make this a regular week in, week out live event. We're going to get to the point where we are streaming on Livestream, Ustream, and Justin TV all at the same time. You're going to be able to find us, no problem. But we want to have a central springboard that we can talk from, and that we can talk with you through the week regarding the topics that we bring forth. So we want you to go to Facebook. Again, facebook.com/live think differently, and that's going to take you to our Facebook page. We want you to like our page so that we can begin to interact with you, and we want you to put on that page anything that you might have thought about this video podcast, any thoughts that might have come up as a result of it. We want to begin to interact with you throughout the week on each topic that we set forth. Again, we're here to challenge each and every person to live and to think differently. And that's what this podcast, this video podcast, is going to be all about. So we're glad that you joined us here on this first live podcast, video podcast here with us. Again, my name is Toby Clark. You can find us at facebook.com/live think differently. We're going to sign off for now, and we'll talk to you guys soon.